Listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Getting on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
Sam Dykstra, what am I about to say? What am I about to say, Sam Dykstra?
Hopefully Happy New Year.
No, there's nobody I'd rather have on this
something like
podcast
that. I don't know.
right now than you. Come on. Come on. You're on. As I said to you, we had a streak. I feel bad. I don't think you were on in December, but we had a pretty good streak there. We had a pretty good run every month.
We did.
Once a month.
I'm happy we're back on the horse. The second day of January, you made sure we weren't going to miss this. So I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate everything. Your brand has never been hotter for multiple reasons. I mean, maybe because of this, I don't know, but most importantly, because of your hard work and your expertise. I think all of that is that it's a huge testament of what a great 2024 you've had. And I do want you to take a pause to understand your excellence in 2024. And it started, I remember we saw each other in spring training, and last spring was the first year that you sort of went around to the different camps and you got to do the interviews with the prospects, and they ran on, you had your MLB network shirt that you wore. It was very official. It was all of it. I mean, this is oh my goodness, he's all grown up. So But yeah, it's
it definitely felt like it. The fact they were willing to trust me with a mic in my hand was what is this? Oh my gosh!
Well, you did a great job, and you did a great job all year long, and I appreciate everything that you brought to this podcast. And you were, I think that I don't know, December is just a weird month because of the winter meetings. Because of, didn't you go somewhere? Did you take a vacation? I can't remember.
I was on vacation for a while. Yeah, I went to Scotland for a bit. I went to north of the border. I've never been to Canada, so I went to Montreal for a little while, kind of recharged the batteries while the Arizona Fall League was done. And we'll see what trades roll in, and I know that's what we're gonna talk about now. But at least there was a little bit of a dip in what I was responsible for there for a few weeks.
Well, if nothing else, we are officially having the first podcast where two members of the podcast both went to Scotland within a month of each other.
Yeah, I was seeing your pictures, and I'm like, are we going to bump into each other in Edinburgh? Can you imagine how random that would be? I would yell your name across the Royal Mile if it meant we were going to meet up somewhere.
I went up to the William Wallace Monument. I got to the very top, and I yelled out, baseball isn't boring. It echoed throughout the valleys. So I feel like right now I want to spend about 20 minutes about regaling each other in our experience in Scotland, but we can do that later. We can do it later. So more importantly, there's baseball to talk about. And in the off season, there is a soundbite. I had on Lucas Giolito a couple days ago, and we were talking about the Red Sox trade of Garrett Crochet, and it came up how that, and he said in the history of baseball, prospects have never been more valued. And I'm like, oh, that's a pretty bold statement, but I think he's right. I think he's right, and that's where you get to a trade like the Garrett Crochet trade. And I know that we compare it to the Chris Sale trade, but you know better than anyone, Sam, that prospects are everything to these people. Not only because they're good or potentially good, but because all the organizations see the absolute best in them. They've drafted them, they developed them, they've nurtured them. They said, you're doing it the way that we want to do it. And most importantly, they're under control for years upon years upon years upon years. So I guess I start there. Would you agree with that statement that in the history of baseball, prospects have never been more valued?
Uh, I don't know if I can compare now to like say, the very start of what we know as the farm system back when Branch Rickey was starting that with the Dodgers and that kind of thing. But you think back to like I've got a Roberto Clemente jersey behind me, and he was a Rule 5 pick
He's a Rule
because
5 guy, right? He's a Rule 5
yeah,
guy.
the Dodgers thought they could sneak him through that, and then the Pirates were like, absolutely not. He seems like a really good right fielder and might have been best right fielder of all time. There's more knowledge on these guys than ever. And that's both within these organizations and externally. I mean, you and I know more about prospects now than we did 10 years ago. And that is certainly reflected in how they're valued in trades. And, the trades we're going to talk about here today, it's fascinating to see who gets dealt. And I think we're seeing a lot more of these. Like I look at like the Josh Naylor trade, right, with Cleveland and Arizona. I have the Arizona Diamondbacks prospects. I ranked them for MLB pipeline. So my mind was immediately like, okay, who are they trading? Who am I gonna have to backfill? Who, whatever. And it ends up being Slade Ciccone, who's no longer a prospect because they're not willing to give up that 5 to 10 guy ranked in your system, but you are willing to give up a major leaguer who has some question marks around him. And the teams are willing to acquire those guys because at least there's less risk because they have seen the major leagues. It's a really interesting time as far as major league trades go in that way.
Yeah, and another part of it is that there's no secrets, right? You have a guy. I remember the example that I guess comes to mind is a few years ago where this guy named Brandon Walter, who was a pitcher in the Red Sox organization. And a lot of teams were asking the Red Sox for Brandon Walter, who hadn't really any sort of track record, but had sort of these measurables, had enough in his dossier leading up to that point where people knew who he was, but he certainly wasn't on any top 20 list, maybe not even a top 30 list. And so the Red Sox were really, really surprised that how many people wanted Brandon Walter, this guy that they thought was, oh no, we know this guy is he's a hidden gem. He's a hidden gem. But then all of a sudden, all these teams start asking for it because there are no secrets. Because most of these teams are looking for those underlying things that previously only the team that had the player knew about. I think that's a change too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use another example, and I don't think his name's come up in any trade offers, but like in terms of how he's valued now, you look at the Milwaukee Brewers, they have a prospect who has only played in the Dominican Summer League. His name's Jesus Made. And he put up pretty good numbers there. But anybody we've ever talked about in the Dominican Summer League, it's typically a teenager. It's guys who are just signed at 16 or a little bit older than that. And if they put up good numbers, you're like, yeah, but that's the DSL. It's essentially glorified high school. I can tell you right now, like what his exit velocity was, average exit velocity was, 90th percentile exit velocity, zone contact rate, all these other measurables that then put him in line with other guys. He was putting up exit velocities that were like on par with Jose Ramirez. And he's doing that at 17, 18 years old. And all of a sudden, Jesus Made is like a little bit of a household name in a Brewer system that is known for doing really well with those guys. Jackson Chourio was just a couple years ago. And now Jesus Made might be more hyped at the same time than Jackson Chourio. And it's not like Jackson Chourio was a prospect 10 years ago. This was within the last 5 years.
Right.
Already these leaps and bounds are going on.
Yeah, and teams are asking for it, and teams are holding on to it because as we'll go back to it, one of the reasons why these teams are valuing these guys so much at the end of the day, it is we're going to have this guy for a long, long time, and the guy that we're trading for, the Corbin Burns of a year ago, we're only going to have for a year, and that's a tough pill to swallow, and I wonder. I hope that doesn't go away. Like I hope those trades don't go away because you have instances of Corbin Burns not re-signing or Juan Soto not re-signing. Because let's stick with Juan Soto, right? I would make the case that, and maybe I can't remember if we talked about this, but every Juan Soto trade that was made was good for the team. All teams.
Right.
Like all teams. And even the one that the Yankees made where they got 1 year of Juan Soto, they give up Michael King, they give up a couple other guys, useful guys. But they made it to the World Series. They had a chance to win a world championship. Let's not devalue that. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I hope they don't go away.
No, 100%. I'm right there with you. I mean, I think if you have an opportunity to go get Juan Soto, you go get Juan Soto. And that's why so many teams were involved in that when all they had to pay this offseason was money. You look at Kyle Tucker. I mean, like the Cubs, was anybody circling them as like a real serious contender in the National League going into next year? No, not necessarily. But if Kyle Tucker is there, who like you can make a case is almost equally valuable for 1 year right now to Juan Soto because he's a better defender, because he's a little bit faster, provides other value beyond just the bat. And the Cubs are like, hey, this is an opportunity for us. Let's just go get the guy and see what happens. Let's get ourselves a chance to be in the dance come, late September, October, November. And if we have Kyle Tucker, we are better, even if it's just for 1 year. It's worth taking that risk, which I applaud them for.
Yeah, and to come back to the team's reluctance to trade the prospects, I think that, I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush, but have been reluctant. We know some GMs more than others, but there's sometimes you just got to say, hey, like Kyle Tucker is a perfect example. We need the jumper cables for this organization. And so, and really some of the names that we're going to talk about, it really is amazing because you have these guys and you see, we love talking about prospects. We love talking about rankings, but the reality is a lot of these guys, they haven't even produced in AAA. They haven't even they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything. And we're talking about trade, like the Crochet trade. Again, I don't want to put cart before the horse, but fine, great, good for you, White Sox, good for you. But Red Sox people, don't stress out about it. It's okay. You know why I say it's okay? Because I have Yohan Moncada and Michael Kopech and the other Basabi brother and somebody else, so like, it's okay. It's okay. And you know what? It's okay if both teams win the trade. It's okay if you lose a trade by, like 2%. It's okay. So yeah. I'm just whatever. I mean, so I'm just ranting and raving, but I want to get to, I asked you, there's no person I'd rather ask this question to, who I want you to sort of going through the prospects that have traded so far, just to sort of, for you, sort of rank them, like how you feel about them, or however you want to present it. It's up to you. It's a blank canvas for you, but I do feel like a lot of people want to know about a lot of these guys, in terms of like who they are, what they are, and how valuable they are. So the floor is yours. What do you want to do? You did 5-1, or what? What do you want to do it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I had.
5-1. 5-1.
I had five prospects that I figured we should talk about here.
Perfect.
So we'll go 5-1. We can count it down. Honestly, getting 4 was super easy. 1 through 4 was super easy for me. It was finding the 5th guy to talk about.
Okay, that's usually how it works. Yeah,
I know, right? Yeah, I know. But some years, especially around the trade deadline, like you could find 5 good names. It's a pretty significant drop off between 5 and 4 here.
Okay.
And we can talk about some honorable mentions later. But the one I'll throw out there was, again, and we're going to talk a lot about this trade, is in the Garrett Crochet deal, is Chase Mydroth, who I have at number 5. He had
interesting. Really? I mean, think about that. A year ago, would you have ever thought doing this exercise that Chase Mydroth would have been lumped in with the 5 best prospects traded in the offseason?
Well, it's just, I look at some of the other names that have been included so far this offseason, and they're not really huge names outside of this big 4. There's 4 top 100 guys, and then nobody else who's really sniffing around that. At least that I can find this so far. So I'll give Chase Mydroth a shout out. 437 on base percentage last year in Worcester. It was the highest among AAA qualifiers, but it was also the highest by anybody age 22 or younger at AAA since at least 2006. That's how far Fangraphs goes back. So you're not going to find anybody else who is younger at that level that had put up a higher OBP in the last 18 seasons than Chase Mydroth. He's really good at controlling that zone. Exit velocities aren't great. Still a question mark about like where he plays. You're going to see a lot more 45s on the scouting report than you'd like. but there's a chance for a really decent hit tool and for him to be a guy who comes off the bench and gets on base. So he's at number 5 for me. Number 4
Well,
is
let
Starlin
me stop
Cava.
you there real quick
Okay,
with
sure.
my Droth, because just knowing what I know about him, it's really interesting. Um, so I look at that trade, and probably a couple other guys in the trade you're probably going to mention, but we compare that trade to everyone wants to compare it to the Chris Sale trade, same teams, obviously pitcher with a couple of years of control. Biggest difference is that Chris Sale had already made 5 All-Star teams, and Garrett Crochet had been starting for a year. But this is why I say that trade, the haul for the White Sox, the White Sox got in that trade, could actually be better than what they got for Chris Sale, despite Chris Sale. And it's in large part because of Mydroth. And because Mydroth is going to be a major league player. Like all the things that you mentioned, Mydroth is going to be a major league player. The biggest reason why he's not valued higher, I don't know any other way to put it. It's because of the way he looks. Like he looks like Dustin Pedroia. Like he like that's how he plays a lot of different positions, but all he does is play the game of baseball really, really well. But in terms of he's not going to be a toolsy guy. Again, I mean, if you put him side by side, back to back with Pedroia, if he is taller, he's not much taller. And so my point is like this guy's going to be a major league player, and yes, he was not one of the top 2 pieces of that trade, but White Sox fans should understand this guy is going to be a major league player that's going to help a team win games. So there's my rant on Chase Mydroth.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to compare him to that Sale deal, I mean, Basabe was not as close as Mydroth is as the third piece in that deal.
And it's the wrong Basabe brother anime. So
yeah, I mean, he's listed at 5'10". It is a legit 5'10" because they have to measure these guys for the strike zone, the robot ump strike zone. So at least we know he is 5'10". But
okay,
yeah,
so I take it back. He's 2 inches taller than Pedroia, or at least 1.5 inches taller than Pedroia.
1.5 inches, right? Yeah. But still, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think the fact that he doesn't hit the ball necessarily hard. I mean, my biggest question is, and this, if there are White Sox fans listening to this, they might get a little scared by this. Is he like a Nick Madrigal type? Nick Madrigal, who was a first-round pick a few years ago, was going to be the next big thing for the White Sox because he put the ball in play a ton. And that's something that Mydroth does as well and has a good on-base percentage. But then it got to the majors and it was like he's swinging a wet newspaper. You're like, you can put the ball in play. If there's not the power behind it, you're not going to be a complete player. But still,
don't you feel like Madrigal was more of a hype prospect than Mydroth?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's it's not a fair comp because Madrigal was coming in as a top 100 guy. Mydroth is not that whatsoever. So it could be like a pleasant surprise. I don't want to say surprise, but like if he has Nick Madrigal's career and Madrigal's been in the majors for a few years, that's less of a disappointment for Mydroth than it has been for Madrigal.
But go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just I think the fact that I'm bringing him up, he's going to the White Sox. The White Sox fans have been through that with Madrigal. Saw that he wasn't totally helpful. He ends up going to the Cubs. It might not evoke the best memories, but still, I think getting a potential third major leaguer out of this deal on top of the 2 prospects we're going to talk about later is pretty good for Garrett Crochet.
Yeah, I give Chris Getzel credit. I mean, listen, he had a lot of teams bidding. Maybe there was a better package you could get. I don't know. Maybe ultimately we never know, or we will know. But still, if you look at this on the surface, you have the top 2 guys, and then you have Mydroth, and you also have Winkleman or Winkleman? Winkleman Gonzalez. Yeah. Somebody else got me second guessing myself. Somebody else had mentioned in a different way, but it's really like this is a guy who a year ago was perceived as a top 2 pitcher in the Red Sox organization, which isn't saying much, but still he has a lot of good stuff. If you're going to take a flyer, the way that I look at this compared to the Chris Sale trade is that you could legitimately have 4 guys who are in the major leagues, which you couldn't say that about the Chris Sale trade. You just couldn't. So
yeah, they were aiming for ceiling with the Chris Sale trade, right? Like They were thinking Moncada. The world thought he was going to be a superstar. It hasn't worked out that way. Kopech, it seemed like he had ace potential, and he's been a fine major leaguer. He's just settled into a relief role. But Yeah, I mean, considering you thought you were getting a number two pitcher and a multi-time All-Star and it didn't work out that way. This is more like, hey, we're going to have our catcher of the future. We're going to have an outfielder who we can plug into right field for a long time. And maybe we get a utility infielder and maybe we get a number five starter out of it too. That's a pretty deeper package for sure.
All right, we spent way too long on number 5. I don't know. Maybe we didn't. I don't know. What do you get for number 4? Here comes the meat and potatoes. Here comes number 4.
Yeah, this is where the run on top 100 guys starts. So the, number four is Starlin Caba, who went to the Marlins in the Jesus Luzardo trade with the Phillies. Love an interdivision trade like this because I think this really helps out both sides. You look at the Phillies right now; they're still trying to get over that hump to win a World Series with this core that they have. They bring in Luzardo. He has the capability of being a number two, but he doesn't have to be in that town. With Nola, with Wheeler there, yes, the durability is a major question. But the Marlins, they get back for this guy who, like, I like that story. He's from the Miami area. He's actually born in Peru to Venezuelan parents, grew up in the Miami area, goes back home after some time in the A system and the Nats system. Didn't quite work out. You know, the Marlins have not been competitive really since the pandemic. So they get back Starlin Caba, who I don't want to say has star potential, but might be the best defensive shortstop prospect in minor league baseball right now. And he's somebody who only turned 19 in December. So the Marlins are picking up chips to be better long term. Caba has that potential. Now he's somebody like Mydroth puts the ball in play a ton. He only struck out 49 times last year against 67 walks. That's a K to walk ratio you just don't see anymore. But his exit velocities were basically bottom of the barrel at single A. Now, most guys his age are spending the entire year at the complex. The Phillies got a little aggressive with him because the strikeouts were so low. They wanted to test him a little bit more. So there's every potential. Again, he just turned 19. He's a switch hitter. He could grow into more power, even if it gets to just 40 grade, which is on the 20 to 80 scale below average. The glove is so good, the contact rate is so good that he could be, I don't want to put a comp on him, but like he could be at least your everyday shortstop moving forward. And that's, as we know, such a valuable position.
What do you make of the Marlins with the Marlins? I know this is a broad question, but it's been a flurry of turning everything over with minor leaguers. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
this is, and Peter Bendix comes in, he's doing things a certain way, wiped out a lot of, this is a team that made the playoffs just 2 years ago. But now, you know, there is an enormous leap of faith in terms of these flurry of guys who are coming into the Marlins, including this one. That this has to be this has to work out. They have to be evaluating these guys the right way.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing I will say about this too is Peter Bendix, where does he come from? Of course, the Tampa Bay Rays. And what have the Rays long had is one of the deepest farm systems in baseball. That's how they normally paper over their money issues. Is just like, we're going to have multiple guys we can bring up to fill this one spot, or multiple arms that are just we're going to keep churning these guys through. So if you look at the Marlins system right now, and I just brought up our top 10 for their system as it stands right now. Thomas White and Noble Meyer are the top two. Those were two draft picks they made a year ago, who were both prep picks at a time where you don't typically take prep pitchers that high because they can be so risky. But I think they got pretty good value in both of those guys, especially Thomas White, who's now their top prospect. Agustin Ramirez, well, we already mentioned Starlin Caba, he's at 3. Agustin Ramirez and Davidson De Los Santos, both of those guys have easy 70 grade, even 80 grade power in the case of Davidson De Los Santos. Robbie Snelling, they bought low on from the Padres. Carter Johnson was a draft pick this year in the second round. Dylan Head was somebody they also got from the Padres in a Luis Ariz deal. Pedro Morlando, their pick this year. So they're getting a lot of prospects now. It's been a little bit of a backlog for the Marlins. They haven't been great at developing, so now they're acquiring it from outside the organization. But now that they're getting this talent, they need those guys to take the next step. They need Robbie Snelling to be the Robbie Snelling from 2023, not from 2024 when he seemed to miss a few steps at Double A. So they're giving themselves the chance. But it's one thing to acquire talent. You need to develop it next, and that's going to be the next step for Miami.
Robbie Snelling, former home run derby champ. I'm acting really smart. I'm acting very smart here because I interviewed him at the Futures game, so and did a quick search of his Wikipedia page. All right, But all right, well, so that's an interesting one. And Lizardo, like that's obvious. Anytime you make a trade with the Phillies or with Dave Dombrowski is going to be like, sure, fine, I dare you to develop him. I dare you.
Yeah.
I dare you make a major leaguer. Because I know what Jesus Lizardo is. He is a major leaguer who's going to help me win a world championship. All right, number three. What do you got?
Number three is Braden Montgomery, who another guy involved in that White Sox Red Sox deal for Garrett Crochet. Broken right ankle for Texas A&M this year, but was the Red Sox first round pick. And I know a lot of people were very high on him. I think he fell to Boston
Because he's wheeling
in
his
the
way
draft.
around the draft room.
Yeah, I mean, he was the heart and soul of that Texas A&M team, and that was a good A&M team. So for them to lose him in the postseason was a big loss for them. A cannon of an arm. He can play center field or right field. I think most people assume he's going to be in right field because the ankle might slow him down coming back from that, but the arm is certainly going to play out there. He's a former pitcher as well. The interesting thing for me from him is, and he talked about this, he thinks of himself completely as a switch hitter, and he's played as a switch hitter, but he had an 819 slugging percentage as a lefty hitter last year compared to 485 from the right side. Now he's a natural righty, but he's better from the left side. And I think part of that is, as a college player, as a prep player, you see more right-handed pitchers, so you get more experience batting from the left side. I'd be interested at what point the White Sox broach the topic of like, hey man, just give up switch hitting. You're so much better from
Oh,
the left side. Let's just try that out.
I hate when players are reluctant. They're always reluctant to do it. They're always reluctant to. Anyway, go ahead. I guess
No,
because it makes so much sense in so many instances, and players are like, no, 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 I don't want to do it. But if you're gonna
yeah,
do it when you're young, when they're impressionable. But go ahead.
right. But I almost wonder if it's going to take him like struggling for 2 years as a righty bat for that to happen for him to get to buy in. I don't know. And maybe that's something they don't even care. I mean, 485 slugging percentage is still pretty good. It's not like we're talking about like it's 320. But just that's something to watch with him. And then, he becomes pretty instantly the White Sox top outfield prospect. I think they get him at an interesting time because the Red Sox, all they were really focused on was just rehabbing the ankle. They haven't really gotten to work with him as a hitter and put their stamp on him. Now the White Sox get to do that really fresh going into spring. So that's going to be fascinating to follow with Braden Montgomery.
Yeah, and keep in mind that when he was drafted, you're right. I mean, he fell, what was it? It was 12, 14.
I think it was 12.
Yeah, 12. And everybody, as soon as they said it, was like this guy would have been in the probably around 6 or 7. But when I talk about him wheeling his way around, I was there at the draft, and they draft him. He's one of the few guys there, and he's wheeling his way around because he has his foot in a boot, which is you don't just typically see that. You see a guy wheeling his way around because it's the ultimate leap of faith. But everyone universally was like, this guy is going to be legit. This guy's good. He's got good character. He's a good guy. He's got a great arm. He all of it. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. You have to, for an organization, even with Garrett Crochet, you have to take a big gulp and be like, oh man, the dream that we had of drafting Braden Montgomery on the day of the draft, that's a tough thing to put in the rearview mirror. It just is. But, so be it.
Yeah, and I hate using this word in some way, but prospects are assets in another way. Like you are drafting a good player because he's good, because he can help you out further down the line. Or in this case, having him as part of your organization is not something anybody else can say. I mean, one reason why I think the Red Sox and White Sox always lined up exceptionally well was because the White Sox said they wanted hitters. The Red Sox had a plethora of good hitters. So it's dealing from the strength from both sides. And Braden Montgomery was very much a part of that. And kudos to them for like taking the good player when he was available. Like you said, we had him ranked at number 8. He falls to number 12. The teams at 8, 9, 10, 11, they all could have taken Braden Montgomery. And, who knows if the White Sox really liked him enough. They went with Hagen Smith when they had their first pick at 5 overall. But maybe they really like Braden Montgomery. Maybe they had him next on their board. And if you're one of those other teams, you could have used that to your advantage, and they didn't, and the Red Sox did.
Yeah. All right. I like that. I like that. So all right. So we have two guys already from. I got a feeling we're gonna have another one from the Garrett Crochet trade. But anyway, who's number two?
Number two is the 14th overall pick from this year's draft. So we went with Braden Montgomery at 12. We're going to go with this guy at 14. And the reason why I have this guy passing Montgomery is because while Montgomery's been recovering from that broken right ankle, this guy was absolutely surging in the minor leagues. That's Cam Smith,
Cam
was
Smith,
acquired.
who we think we're gonna have on the podcast in the coming days. But Cam Smith, Florida State, right?
Correct. Yep.
I saw him play in person. He looks like a big league ball player. Like we talk about Chase Mydroth being the gritty, gutty little baseball player. 5'10". I mean, listen, I feel bad because you're right. I mean, he's 5'10", he's 5'10", but just take my word for it. But Cam Smith is a statuesque guy who looks like, oh my goodness, that is a major league corner infielder. And he didn't disappoint. So yeah.
No, he didn't. I mean, well, here's the fact that many of your listeners might know, but I'll throw it out there anyways. He homered in 6 straight games after getting drafted at Myrtle Beach in the Cubs system. And I was putting together a reel of all those homers. And it looked like such an easy swing. It plays well to all fields. He can drive it to right. He can pull it to left. He can hit it out to center. Now, mind you, again, this is a guy from Florida State going up against single A arms. Like he should be doing well, but he had amongst guys drafted this year and played in the minor leagues, he had the most hits, he had the most homers, and he had the most total bases. He was taking minor league baseball by storm in a way that nobody else was. I mean, you go back to 2023, who was doing that? It was Wyatt Langford. And then we see Wyatt Langford spend all this year in the major leagues. It's not quite the same scenario. I think Wyatt Langford's more athletic and does some other things that Cam Smith does, but he got off to a really, really hot start, reached double A already. And like I said, jumps over somebody like Braden Montgomery, who's taken 2 picks earlier because the power was there. He needs to elevate the ball more to get to that power. He has too many ground balls. He did that at Florida State. Even with the power that he showed in the Cubs system, they were still too high of a ground ball rate. But I think that's something that's fixable, especially this early in his career. Get him to elevate the ball more, and he could be hitting 30 to 40 homers at the major league level someday for Houston.
Would you, after all the things that we said about, the danger of overvaluing prospects and trades to get a guy like Kyle Tucker, for you, was that a guy, were you surprised that they let him go even in that trade?
No, because I think there's like so many moving parts to it. I think the Cubs, some of the prospects that they have right now, a lot of them are basically major league ready or knocking on the door. You look at Matt Shaw, you look at Owen Casey, you look at James Triantos, you look at Kevin Alcantara. Cade Horton has been injured, but it has upper level experience. A lot of those guys can help them in that window now that they are trying to compete in with Kyle Tucker. Cam Smith is probably a year away. So he's a little bit easier to trade from that aspect. And, they have third base basically open right now. uh, you know, Shaw moves into that spot, and then you hope he's there for years and years and years, which would essentially block Cam Smith. So again, they're dealing from a position of strength at third. And I think from their perspective, yes, Cam Smith, his stock has gone up since the draft. So maybe you're dealing when his stock is as high as it's going to get. Like maybe he doesn't elevate the ball more. Maybe instead of being a 30 plus homer guy, it's 15 to 20 because he's got a ground ball rate 55 to 60%. We'll see. It's so early in his development that they're not going to feel the pain of that for a little while at the very least.
Trivia question. What major league manager's son managed Cam Smith this past year?
Oh, I should know this.
I
should know this.
I put you on the spot.
I know. Yeah. Was it Torrey?
Yes.
It was Torrey Lavula's son. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nick Lavello was he manages the South Bend team and for the Cubs system. Is it South Bend?
Yeah, South Bend. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I want to still make sure that I feel like I'm somewhat smart. But yeah. So there you go. a, a little bit of knowledge that nobody cares about is totally useless. Yet it justifies my existence. All right, number one, I gotta imagine rhymes with smile meal. Um, correct?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Number one right now is Kyle Teal. And I could see maybe you and I are having this conversation a year from now and Cam Smith takes off. Like I said, Astros do fix something with his swing or his approach and he surpasses Kyle Teal. But right now, for me, because Kyle Teal had such a good first season reaching AAA, I think being part of that 2023 draft class, it's easy to compare him to the Skeenses, the Cruzes, the Langfords of the world and be like, those guys made the majors 1 year after being drafted. Why not Kyle Teal? Anybody who makes AAA 1 year after being drafted, no matter who you were as a college performer, something's gone right. So Kyle Teal made AAA in his first full season, 13 homers, 819 OPS, grades out as a 55 grade catcher, which is above average. He has a really strong arm as well. All the pieces are there for him to be a pretty good catcher. And I think that's valuable. I mean, how often do you look at these really, really good teams? You look at the Dodgers, for instance. I think one underrated part about the Dodgers is that they have Will Smith behind the plate, and they've had Will Smith behind the plate for a very long time. Adley Rutschman has been a key part of turning things around in Baltimore. I know he didn't have a great year this year, but like if you have that strong catcher, if you're strong up the middle at catcher, shortstop, second base, center field, that's the spine of good teams, and then you spread it out from there. So I think Kyle Teal, yes. Is he gonna or no, is he gonna be like a top three catcher in the game 5 years from now? Not necessarily. There's not a lot of 60s on the scouting report, but could he be a top 10 catcher in the game who's on the south side for a very long time? Yes. And he would outlive whatever Garrett Crochet was going to bring to the White Sox. And, hopefully he's that starting catcher for you in that first game back in the playoffs, whenever that's going to be for Chicago.
And I asked a scout this who was assigned a lot of the games that Kyle Teal played in, and this is before the trade. And I said, hey, just rate if you can rank the top four guys in the Red Sox system. And obviously that's Christian Campbell, that's Marcelo Meyer, that's Roman Anthony, and it was Kyle Teal. It was before Braden Montgomery hadn't played. And he ranked Kyle Teal number one. Now, understand, I mean, you have a dynamic power hitting outfielder in Roman Anthony who can play center field. You have Marcelo Meyer, the fourth pick overall in the draft, who, is a shortstop, premier position, who can do a ton of things when he's healthy. And then you have what a lot of people feel like is the minor league player of the year in 2024 in Christian Campbell. And he picked Kyle Teal. And a lot of it was because of position, which is cool. Like you said, like you can't undervalue that. And the fact that Kyle Teal can do a lot of different things. And one of the things I also remember about Kyle Teal is I was up in Portland a day where they were testing sprints. I forget what exactly sprints was. And I had talked to Kyle and those guys a few times. So I'm just like, you're going to do it? He's like, last time we did this, I finished first in the team. I'm like, oh, really? Like, really? And like, so I'm not saying that makes him a great player, but it shows you the type of like skills and tools he has. Because this isn't like a smaller catcher. I mean, he's not tall. He's not super tall.
No,
but it's not like he's
no.
a diminutive catcher who's fast. No, I mean, he's a sturdy guy who runs fast. So in my book, that's a plus. That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah, I think he had 12 steals last year, which, most players isn't huge, but like to get a catcher with double-digit steals is pretty good. And the White Sox are in an interesting position, at least the way I look at it, because they have Kyle Teal now, who's the number two prospect in their system. They also have Edgar Caro, who they got from the Angels a few years ago, who's also a catcher who has AAA experience. So they have two potential guys who are both top 100 talents for us right now, who are knocking on the door of Chicago. And you would love to say, oh, they're going to be 1A and 1B, but somebody's going to have to be the primary catcher. I think Kyle Teal is going to be that guy because he is more athletic. But part of me wonders, like, would they consider moving him to the outfield? I'm not saying he's Dalton Varsho, but Dalton Varsho, there were whispers of him being supremely athletic behind the plate and like, hey, what if we just stick him in the outfield and see what happens? And now he's one of the best defensive outfielders in baseball. People forget he used to be a catcher. I don't know if Kyle Teel has that in him. I don't know if he wants to do that. It always seems like he's, a very outgoing person who likes being involved, and there's no position that gets you more involved than catcher. But he gives the White Sox options, and that's what you need for a rebuilding farm system.
Well, and also Corey Lee, who is another guy who doesn't hit, but if you go to his baseball savant page, it's really, really, defensively,
Right.
it's pop time, everything is like, and that can be a useful thing, even as a complimentary. So yeah, I mean, in the last couple of years in these trades, the White Sox, to your point, have set themselves up for I love that, the spine of the team. That is absolutely right. They need a spine. The White Sox need a spine, right? They need they got part of it. Now they got to figure out the rest of it. So who was it? So I got to ask, like, who was the guy left off?
So I was sitting here wondering if I should have included Caleb Durbin, who was included in the Devin Williams deal between Milwaukee and the Yankees. Devin Williams going to the Yankees now, potentially being their closer. We'll see how that goes between him and Luke Weaver. And Caleb Durbin, some people might know, stole 29 bags in the Arizona Fall League this year, which is a record. And considering that league used to play twice as many games, the fact that he is setting the record now is pretty special. And I think he was 29 steals in 30 attempts. The guy is pretty quick, but he can really pick his spots. And Aaron Boone was talking him up as like, hey, if we lose Gleyber Torres, Caleb Durbin could be our second baseman because he's another high contact rate guy who has speed. And it's not great exit velocity, although he dealt with some injury problems this year that I think dulled some of that. But like he lifts the ball and pulls the ball really well, so at least he can get extra base hits. I just don't know where he plays. He's a great fit for Milwaukee, and Milwaukee has talked about this. Like they love their fast dudes between Sal Frelick, guys like that, Bryce Terang, who's a really good fielder, obviously. They love dudes who can run and play multiple positions or play primary or up the middle. So I'm interested to see what they do with him, but I think he's a utility man moving forward. And if you compare his data with Mydroth's data, Mydroth was better on the exit velocity side, was a little bit better in terms of contact rate and stuff like that. So I leaned that way. And Durbin is on the older side, but I'm fascinated to see what they do with him. He's another tool that Milwaukee can play with, and they tend to get the most out of guys like that.
You mentioned Sal Frelick. It made me remember we had Pedroia on a week or so ago, and he was talking about how, because we were talking about Pat Murphy. Obviously, Pat Murphy had coached Pedroia in college, and he said that I said, "Oh, well, have you come in and given the Pedroia fire and brimstone speech to the Milwaukee Brewers?" He's like, "Yeah, but it's like really not really." But what I did, Murph had asked me to get with Frelick in the offseason to teach him how to play second base because. Yeah, he was like, and Pedroia's like, yeah, I can do that, but why would you ever want to do that? So I guess they worked out for a little bit, and just in case, the positions and they were getting outfielders or whatever it is. But I'm like, oh man, really? So there you go. Yeah, so that's a good one. It's a good list. It's a good list. It's a solid list. I mean. The offseason, I don't know if you know this, the offseason's not over.
It's not over. No,
it's not
I'm
over.
still keeping an eye on Dylan Cease with the Padres.
I think. Oh, yeah, that's
him.
right. Padres.
It feels like AJ Preller's always getting itchy, right?
And he hasn't done much. I mean, maybe they're working on Sasaki, but it was you. I got to imagine that if we're going to do this list a month from now, someone from the Orioles organization has to be on it.
I would hope so. I mean, they've got some pretty good pieces that they could trade in Samuel DeSayo and Kobe Mayo, who, if either one was traded, would go to the top of this list immediately. But both are kind of blocked right now. So it's like, this is the time to trade them while they have value. But I don't know. Maybe the deal's just not out there.
But the Orioles, there is no team that needs it definitively. This is what you need. You need a top of the rotation starting pitcher. That you missed out in Corbin Burns. This is a reason why you trade for Corbin Burns, and so be it if you have to do it again. It almost worked out. You'll never know unless you try. And you got enough pieces in that farm system where you can keep trying. It's okay. It's okay. So I don't know.
Yeah, you can't be wasting another year of Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson and just be like, well,
No.
maybe for we're the first wild card this year, that'll be fine. It's like, no, you're this is the window. Get aggressive. So maybe they will be. We'll see.
All right, good talk. All right, now we're gonna let all the listeners soak in what you said, and we're gonna talk about Scotland. All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.